Shalom Aleichem, my dear brothers and sisters. In this video I would like to talk to you about last week's parasha, which was a parasha called Behar. It's in the book of Leviticus towards the end of the book. And in that parasha, what it talks about the seventh year on the Jewish calendar, the seventh year cycle called Shmitah. That's the name of the year. And let me explain what it is and several laws about this year. So, as you guys know that in our calendar we have what's called the days of the week, right? So the week is broken up into 7 days. And in the Jewish calendar at least, it starts from Sunday, which is called the first day, and ends with Saturday, which is called the seventh day. In Hebrew it's called Shabbat, and in Hebrew the word for 7 is Sheva. So it's actually the same two-letter root, the word Shabbat and the word Sheva, which is the seventh day. That's when it comes to the days of the week. Now, in regards to the years, in Jewish calendar we have a similar system where the years are cycled from 1 to 7. You know, we have year 1, year 2, year 3, it goes up to year 7, and then it starts from year 1 again, the next Shmitah cycle. And what happens on the 7th year of the Shmitah cycle? Now, before I go to explain what happens on the 7th year, let me first tell you what happens on the first 6 years of the yearly Shmitah cycle. So the first through 6th year, when Jews gather in their crops in the land of Israel, meaning, like, let's say a Jew owns a field, right, in the land of Israel, what he's required to do, and this, by the way, you know, all this was applicable in the ancient days when we had the Jewish monarchy, a religious government. Nowadays, sadly, we don't have a Jewish monarchy in the land of Israel, and we don't have the religious government, and therefore these laws are not really enforced anymore. So some of the laws are not followed, except some of the religious people that still follow some of the laws, and there are some technical problems because we are still in exile. We are still in the exile mode, and that's, by the way, the sad thing, I would say, the depressing part of Judaism, that nowadays we cannot see the full Judaism. The Judaism that you guys know of is really only part of Judaism. The real Judaism, the full Judaism, it has much more beautiful stuff that you don't unfortunately see today. For example, the pilgrimage 3 times a year, the Shmitah cycle, like what I'm gonna actually talk about in this video. There's a lot of the Kohanim, the Leviim, the temple, the service done in the temple, the sacrifices. All that part today is missing from our religion, sadly. But God willing, we believe that one day it will all be restored. So anyways, going back to our original topic. So what happens when a Jew owns a field in the land of Israel from year 1 to 6? So from year 1 to 6, the first thing a Jew has to do is separate a portion of his gathered crops, and it's called, this portion is called Truma. And this portion has to go to the Kohen. Now the Kohen, who is the Kohen? The Kohen is a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses, peace be upon them. So any descendant of Aaron is called a Kohen, right? Male descendants. And obviously, so the first portion has to go to the Kohanim, the Kohens, and their families, obviously. And the amount in the Torah is not specified exactly how much, but rabbinically, if I'm not mistaken, the rabbis made a certain percentage, and that's at 2.5% goes to the Kohen. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 1/40th of your crop. So this was the first thing that as Jews who own field have to do in the land of Israel, is separate what's called Truma and give it to the Kohen, 2.5%. After a Jew is done with that, then he has to separate another 10%, and this is called maaser. Maaser goes to the Leviim. Leviim were the tribe of Levi. That's one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe of Levi. Now, since God designated that tribe to serve God in the temple full time, meaning 24/7, and this tribe on its own did not have any land apportioned to them, and therefore it was the responsibility of the Jewish people, of the rest of the tribes, to actually support this tribe of Leviim. This is done on all the years, from year 1 to year 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, except year 7. Year 7 I'm going to talk about it then. So from year 1 to 6, this 10% would go to the Leviim, which is the tribe of Levi, the 10%. And this is called maaser. From the word eser means tenth, 1/10. Now, after that's done, then a Jew is supposed to separate another 10% afterwards. Now, that other 10% already depends on what year it is. So, on the years 1, 2, 4, and 5, it's called maaser sheni. It's like the second 10th, literally translated. And what it is that as Jews, we had to take this portion of the crop, the second 10%, and we had to bring it to Jerusalem and eat it in Jerusalem, basically invite friends, family, and eat it in Jerusalem. Or we could trade that food in wherever, let's say, which city we live in Israel, let's say in, I don't know, Kiryat Gat, right? We would trade this 10% of the crop in that city, take the money and bring that money in to Jerusalem, and then spend that money in Jerusalem and invite family and friends. And this was called maaser sheni, the second maaser. And the idea behind it, by the way, is so that Jews are constantly coming to Jerusalem. It's a similar idea that we have the 3 times a year pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And the reason for that is because Jerusalem was the center of the Torah. It was full of scholars, the Kohanim, scholars. The temple was there. The sacrifice service was being done there. And so that a Jew never loses connection to God, through his holy city. And therefore, that's why the Torah enacted that we would constantly be forced, so to speak, to travel to Jerusalem and spend some time in Jerusalem. We have the 3 times a year pilgrimage that we are required to do when the temple is standing, right, in Jerusalem. Then we have this, the maaser sheni. So that's being done. Maaser sheni, the second maaser, is being done on years, again, 1, 2, 4, and 5. Now, what happens on the year 3 and 6, the 2 years that I skipped so far? So on those 2 years, what's called, instead of the maaser sheni, the second maaser, there was something called maaser ani, the poor 10th, the 10th for the poor. And what that was is that we would again separate the 10% after we gave to the Kohen the 2.5%, after we gave to the Levi, which had no land, the tribe of Levi, the 10%. So after that, we would separate the 10% again, and this was given to the poor of Israelites in the ancient days. This was called maaser ani. Now this was done on years 3 and 6. So that recaps of what Torah obligates us to do from year 1 to 6. Now what happens on the year 7th? Now the 7th year is what's called Shmitah. Sometimes in English they translate it as a sabbatical year. It's the year where God tells us in the Torah that this year we are supposed to open up our fields completely and announce everything ownerless. So all of Israel announces their fields as ownerless, meaning that anybody who needs food, who wants food, can come and help themselves on anyone else's field. And this was what the Torah required us to do. And when I say anyone, I mean anyone, even wild animals. The Torah says that this year is the year of rest for the land, meaning we are not allowed to work the land. We're not allowed to, gather in crops for business purposes. we are basically supposed to open everything up, and everybody can, help themselves whatever they need. Now the owner is also allowed to pick his own, fruits and vegetables and wheat, and he's even allowed to bring it inside on the condition that there's still some food left outside. If, let's say, he brings, let's say, I don't know, stacks of wheat inside and leaves outside for the people to take, and let's say outside it runs out, then the owner of the field is required to actually bring it back out from his house back to the outside, so that the people always have the access, to all the crops. And this is called the Shmitah. And this is, I think this is one of the beautiful parts we had in the ancient days, which sadly we are missing right now, because in Israel there's no religious government that enforces these laws. However, in Israel, the religious farmers, they still do practice this law. And in fact, I remember my rabbi in Israel once told me that he has a neighbor that has a garden in his, by his house, and on every Shmitah year, which is the 7th year, he would actually put up a sign on the garden saying that this is hefker, meaning it belongs to everyone, it's ownerless. Please, anyone who wants to come and help, pick anything you need and take it. And so this was the laws of Shmitah. Now, one more thing I want to mention is the Jubilee year, which is actually what the Parsha was talking about. This is the Jubilee year. In Hebrew, it's called Yovel. It's the every 50th year. So how we have, like, say, from year 1 to 7, that's one Shmitah cycle, right? And from year 1 to 7, that's the second Shmitah cycle. So once you have 7 Shmitah cycles, the next year, after 49th year, the next year is the 50th year, and it's called the Jubilee year. In English, in Hebrew, it's Yovel. And what happens on this year is, again, it's like a Shmitah, meaning everything, all the fields and everything become ownerless. Everybody can help themselves. But in addition, what happens on this year is that all the lands return to their original owners. Meaning, when back in the days when Yehoshua bin Nun, peace be upon him, separated the land, apportioned it to each tribe and each family and each clan of the tribe, that apportion has that whatever he apportioned has the status eternally, meaning forever. This is apportioned to that specific family, that piece of land, and so therefore, every 50 years, if, let's say, a person was forced to sell his land for whatever reason, on the 50th year, the land would automatically return back to its original inheritor of that land. And the reason, by the way, for that is I heard something interesting from Rav Yitzhak Zilber, Zichron Tzadik Livracha. And this is what he says. He says there's a known problem in the economies of the world, whether it's communism, whether it's capitalism, and the problem is a known problem, that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. Why? Imagine that there are two people, right? They have the same assets, right? And then something happened. One of them got sick, was sent to the hospital. He was forced to, let's say, sell his house or his land, right? He sells his land, comes out of the hospital. He has no land to live, so he ends up renting. While he's renting, there's no way he can afford to buy a new land, so he's paying the guy for the land. So the guy who's renting him the land is getting richer, right? It could be the same guy that they started off initially with. So that guy is getting richer, while this guy, because he doesn't have land, he cannot produce his own crop. And he's getting poorer and poorer. And eventually, what ends up happening is that even affects even the children. Then the children cannot get out of this loop. They are poor, and there's no way for them to get out of this loop. Why? Because the others are getting richer, and this one's getting. It's like there's a known theory called zero-sum game. In order for somebody to win, somebody else has to lose. It's like a known phrase in economics. So therefore, what did the Torah do? The Torah made sure that this would not happen. How? It decreed that the land returns back to the original inheritor after 50 years. So a Jew in the land of Israel, theoretically, can only sell his land for up to 50 years, not more. And even if the person, let's say, is old and he's sold his land for 50 years and he's not gonna see when the land comes back to him, but at least his children will get it back. And therefore, there's not gonna be this uh, eternal loop where, the people are just getting poorer and poorer and poorer, and eventually, they have nothing, and the other ones are getting richer, richer, richer. So the Torah made sure that every 50 years the lands return back to their original inheritors, and therefore there's this equilibrium that constantly exists. This is the economy of the Torah. Ishtabach Shmo La'ad. Thank you for watching.